Okay, Mark Shotton, welcome to the Amateur Rugby Podcast.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
What I'd like is if you could just tell the people a little bit about yourself, in particular your sort of rugby history.
Oh, crikey, how long have you got? So I grew up playing rugby in a rugby league loving town in Widnes. So I probably flung a high ball when I was probably 9 years old. I'm now the princely age of 54, and I don't think I've been too far away from a rugby ball or a rugby club ever since. So played through my teens, was fortunate enough or unfortunate enough, as my nose will bear testimony, to play for Widnes at Rugby League in their Alliance team, their A team. That was a star-studded team. Went to university, played rugby, moved to London, joined a rugby club, moved to the other side of London, joined a rugby club. And in that second rugby club, there was a ladies team, and their fly half, I quite fancied her, to be honest. So I pursued her like any good open side would. And she became my girlfriend, and she's now my wife. And then, crikey, probably 25 years ago, she and I moved from London to the northwest of England, back home like a prodigal son. And I've been at Wilmslow Rugby Club ever since. So I played out my my sort of first team, descended to the second team, descended to the third team, descended to the fourth team, into the vets. And then during that, I was privileged enough we've got 3 children, one of whom has played rugby, and I was privileged enough to get involved in coaching him. And that taught me that I didn't really understand any of the laws that I'd pretended to understand previously. And that was brilliant. And I still play. I'm grey-haired and broken-nosed enough to have been invited onto our club's committee about 4 years ago. So I help in the organisation of a rugby club, a grassroots level club. We play at level 6. When we get to level 5, or God forbid, level 4, we have a nosebleed and come straight back down. And we know our geography, and we provide rugby for 3 senior teams and about 350 kids on a Sunday. So in spite and despite of the last 18 months that we've all gone through, it was lovely to be back there on Saturday, cheering along, having a beer with my old mates, and watching 45 lads have a shower and come out and have a beer in the sunshine. So rugby is part of my life.
Yeah, tell me about that energy at the weekend, because like you say, after 18 months of struggle, there must have just been it must have been a really amazing feeling to sort of be back kind of within that rugby family.
Yeah, it was great. Young and old, male, female, involved in rugby at the sharp end or not. It was brilliant. And I think our club, like every other club, has stuttered and spluttered to get back to some sort of normalcy. And it was a palpable feeling that not just the players had missed it, but the old Alakadoos, where I'm graduating towards, have missed it. We've all missed seeing each other. And there were, after the game, the first team pitch was just full of kids kicking a football or a rugby ball about, and their parents were, had that hour and a half or so having a gin and tonic or a pint of lager or whatever they were doing, and it was just lovely to get back. And I think from a playing perspective, even the opposition, almost the scoreline didn't really matter on Saturday.
Yeah.
And we had 2 games at home. We won both, but that wasn't the point. The fact is that, 2 teams slogged it out for 80 minutes. There was a lot of injuries, which would probably bear testimony to the fact they haven't tackled each other properly for 18 months. So yeah, it was great. And then the Sunday, I was down there on the Sunday, and crikey, it was first day back at school times 100. It was bonkers. So that was great. Yeah.
Amazing. Okay, let's rewind a little bit now back to your early days and playing rugby league. Was that was that a conscious choice, or was it being in a rugby league town, and so it was almost like the only choice for you at the time?
It was the only choice. Yeah. Weirdly, the primary schools in Widnes all play rugby league. So
right.
Whether or not you want to play rugby union or not, you've got to play rugby league. And I was fortunate enough that my teacher at primary school was a big Widnes Rugby League supporter, and almost, I mean, this is dating me, but it's going back to the sort of late 70s. If you didn't play rugby in Widnes, you were considered a little suspect.
Right.
So there wasn't much drama going on these days. There wasn't much diversity of education going on. So I dived straight in, and then went to secondary school. And again, there was a rugby master who was ingrained in the local rugby union club, and I went down there, and it was just a rite of passage. It's what you did, and loved it. And you know, when I look back, probably, wow, 35 years of playing rugby at least, that Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, repeat forever, just became part of who I was. It's what I did. And the odd time when we all get injured, I hated. And I've probably kept myself reasonably fit because I didn't like not playing. I'm an awful supporter. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I concur with the being injured and not playing. I really love pre-season. I might be one of the few people that do. But again, I think it's because I've missed the Tuesday, Thursday, routine through the summer. And then you get back to pre-season, everybody's, fresh and keen to see each other again and all that kind of stuff. So like, I'm a big fan of the pre-season as well.
Yeah, I found myself, so I play probably 12 or 15 years ago, when lads of my generation were getting to late 30s, 40. They chose to retire from playing a game that was causing them to be injured all the time. And I carried on playing. But about 10 or 12 of them formed what has now become affectionately known as Fat Dads. So on a Thursday night, come rain or shine, 52 weeks of the year, we play, because I've now graduated to that as well. We play tick and pass to our own rules. We scream and yell and shout at each other. If we catch the ball 3 times consecutively, we stop and have a party. And the critical part of that is what we run around for an hour. And then we go and just sit and chat together as a group of blokes for sometimes 2 or 3 hours. And it's the 2 or 3 hours that really matters. And I found myself down at our rugby club the other night. We do ours in the sunshine, allegedly, from about 6 o'clock till 7, and then the first team come along, like you just said, they've come back and they've all started training together. And I found myself saying a strange thing to the lads, who I know quite well, that, lads, properly, you're preaching to the converted. There's not wonderful numbers here tonight. You need to get hold of your mates and bring them down, because one day you won't be able to do this. And when that day comes, you'll rue the opportunity that you had of coming. So make the most of it. And then I walked off like a gnarled old fool to some sort of guarded remarks from a few. Who's that old geezer there? And actually, it's right. Rugby's well, as I said, it's part of my life. It's part of who I am. I look on my bookcase over there, and it's just filled with ridiculous amounts of rugby books, which I devour. So yeah.
Yeah, that's an interesting point you made there about just the social aspect of it and how important that is. And to be honest, I think that's one of the biggest reasons, most social players play is because of the camaraderie and the social aspect. The sport is almost in some ways incidental to that. Would you agree?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And going back, answering your earlier question a little bit in that context, I joined Widnes Rugby Union Club at probably the age of 13 or 14. And it's one of those clubs, and I do think rugby clubs are the same the world over. There are people in them, when there's a job to do, they stick their arm up and they get involved, and they put themselves out for ridicule, but they get involved and they make stuff happen. And I was blessed by a couple of fellas, Peter Barrow and John Ashton, who became our coach until I was 19 and went off to university. And they made it fun. They probably took what was a collection of 35 lads off the streets, because otherwise, what would we have got up to? And they made the training fun. So while we were fit and while we were quite a respectable and successful side, that was secondary. They made it, you know, we would never miss Tuesday and Thursday nights, ever. And it was a social thing for us. It was where, before the advent of mobile phones, we planned our Saturday nights. And crikey, if we can all remember that, but if somebody said we're meeting at the Ring of Bells at 8 o'clock, if you weren't there, you weren't going out. So we didn't have the need for, oh, where are you, and all that nonsense. So it became the center of my social life, and has continued to be so. So yeah, it wouldn't surprise you, my best friends are deeply ingrained rugby souls as well. So
yeah, same. So tell me about coming to London. How old were you? Did you say when you did that? Was that like a big step? And how welcoming were the rugby clubs when you turned up?
Well, I went to Manchester University for 3 years and played rugby locally, and then as with a lot of people, I journeyed down to London to get a job. I'd got a job with Courage, the Brewers, who are based in West London in a place called Staines. But my first appointment with them was in the East End, so in Brick Lane. So I was put up in the Romford Sports and Social Village Hotel, which was a dreadful place. I hope nobody's listening from that place, but it was a dreadful place. And I joined for about 6 weeks, Barking Rugby Club, home of Jason Leonard, of course, who were incredibly welcoming. You know, they came in, they couldn't understand a word I was saying, and I couldn't understand a bloody word they were saying. But I trained there, and I had a couple of games for their third team. And then my brother, who was in Southeast London, after probably 6 weeks, he took pity on me and he said, instead of you living in a hotel, which is no fun, come and stay in our spare room. And he lived in Camberwell. So I went down there. And he played. He's 10 years older than me, but he was playing for Streatham and Croydon. So I went down to Streatham and Croydon with him. We look incredibly similar, or we did then. He's lost all his hair. I've just lost most of my hair. But then we look very similar. So we played in the same team for a couple of years, which was great fun. And sparing his blushes, I would suggest John's he's a much bigger build than me. But what I lack in physical stature, I make up with in temperament, and probably the wrong sort of temperament. So every fight I would get into, he would end up having to finish for me. But that was great. That was great fun. And again, you join a rugby club, don't you? And I've joined plenty. And you immediately, as long as you observe the social etiquette and you buy your own round and you make a tackle now and again, and you fit in, you immediately get 45 mates straight away. Somebody in there will fix you a wobbly patio stone. Somebody will help you out at work. They become friends without us really knowing. And I think that's part of God's greatest sporting gift to humanity, which is rugby. That camaraderie that's built when you join a rugby club. So I was there, and then I was hauled back over to West London by Courage. And again, you know, we all move a little bit around the country in our 20s and 30s because of work, I guess, and I'm no different. And I went over there. I'm sat in the canteen one day, and a big, thick-set guy called Ken Nichol, who'd played his rugby in Scotland, was in London, worked for Courage, he was probably one of the best salesmen Courage had, but you would never copy anything he did, if that ever made sense. And he just sat down. I didn't know him, and he just sat down and he said, "Right, I understand you're living in Staines." I said, "That's right." And he said, "Right, we train Tuesdays, we train Thursdays, and we play on a Saturday. I'll see you on Tuesday." Okay. So
that doesn't sound like a question. That sounded more like a commandment.
It was a commandment. And I turned up at Staines in, oh crikey, 1991 or so. And I trained Tuesday and I trained Thursday and played in the second team on a Saturday, and eventually worked my way into the first team. And again, I stayed there for probably nearly 4 years. Met my girlfriend, who's now my wife. Played rugby with her little brother, and that's really how I met her. Yeah, and again, a lovely club in that they had a lovely as rugby clubs as I've witnessed. Some of them are great at certain things and not very good at other things. What Staines did really well is they had a thriving junior section. So based just off the 316, about 4 miles from Harlequins. So quite a junior club in stature, but their junior minis and junior section was enormous. Probably 400 girls and boys running around on a Sunday. And the coach we had was a chap called Bob Lawless, he was a PT instructor at the Felton Borstal. So whenever it got too cold to train at Staines, we would go to Felton Borstal and train with the inmates. Jesus, and that was hard. But he insisted on a couple of things, which is all to do with the family of rugby, which was we had a rota where every first team player had to go down and spend at least 1 weekend out of 4 helping to coach the minis and juniors. And he said, I don't want you to do it because I want you to do it to say we're the first team and show off. I want you to go down there because the best players are the best teachers. And he himself had been a primary school teacher. And it was an education. You're suddenly going along to a bunch of 12-year-olds and you're trying to explain the nonsense that we get up to on a Saturday. And then you realize, I don't really understand it myself. So that was great. And the other thing he did was we had another monthly rota where there were, I think when I joined then, it's a bit of sign of the times this, there were 7 teams on a Saturday. Incredible amount of blokes playing rugby. It's now, crikey, we're running 3 teams at Wimslow. Possibly we'll move to 2. COVID might change that, but back then, so every month, every team, and sometimes it was 2 teams, had to man the bar. And again, that was just, anyone comes in and says, oh, 2 pints of lager, 3 pints of Guinness and a packet of crisps. And suddenly you're thinking, actually, where's the crisps? And how much is lager? And all this. And it was just a wonderful way of not forcing us, but making that joining of the hands together a bit more formal than otherwise. And I thoroughly loved it. I was going out with Sharon, my wife, as I say. We had no kids. I was living in Twickenham by that point. And Saturday nights, Saturday night started at about 11 o'clock in the morning when you'd go and have a cup of coffee somewhere and think about the game. You'd buy a paper, you'd get down to the club early, and you're nodding means you've done it yourself.
100%, yeah.
And you walk in and you want to be first in the changing room and you get your mind set. And we were playing reasonable rugby. We were in London Division 1 in the London divisions, which was quite competitive. And we'd play the game, and then I wouldn't dream of going anywhere else. And God forbid if anybody got married or had a christening in the season. So that was my rugby. And I from being this peculiar place up north, I came to London thinking that rugby was just about kicking, and it was all about Rob Andrew, and I didn't really care for it much. And would they like it if I tried to teach them how to play rugby league? And it was a bit of a north-south divide in my head. It's not the case at all. Rugby is rugby, and it's not just universal within this country. It's universal properly within the world. So, and I've been fortunate enough to go on quite a few of the dreaded rugby tours. I say dreaded rugby tours, they're just a celebration of life. They're not just rugby tours. So Staines were a very good touring side.
What kind of places did Staines go to?
We had well, not terribly romantic. We had a very entertaining trip to the Sandown and Shanklin Sevens on the Isle of Wight, where one of the guys worked for London Transport. We went there in a big red double-decker bus, which he'd, inverted commas, borrowed for the weekend. which just meant that as soon as you go down the A3 and you get into some of the queues going down there, because it's got that hop on, hop off thing at the back on like a big London bus, you just put 40 lads in there, and suddenly we're leaving bags on the roadside, and where's your bag? Stop the bus, my bag's gone missing. It's what 12-year-olds would do if they would have money. So yeah, and they had a couple of overseas tours. We went to Barcelona, which was just a drinking tour, really, with a bit of rugby thrown in for good measure.
Yeah, you do have to play rugby if you go on a rugby tour. Otherwise, it's just a weekend away, isn't it? And it's not the same. You do actually have to play.
That's absolutely right. You're dead right. And you know, going back to something we said earlier, part of my belief that rugby's been in my life and I've kept myself quite fit, so I play all the time, is because I hate being injured. And when you're injured or you're not playing, and you watch the lads that you're a member of their team and they play and they come off, and they might have conducted an 80-minute 3-3 draw, which was deathly boring, but to them it meant the world. And if you haven't played and you haven't had a shower, you're almost not entitled to have a beer afterwards. So yeah,
it's almost like you've got to earn it, haven't you? And there's that the camaraderie comes from being part of it, and I completely agree. It doesn't really matter what the game looked like or how well you played or anything like that. Just that teamship, that camaraderie.
Yeah.
If you weren't quite a part of it, then it's not the same.
No, and you know, I have a great regard for. So we're Wimslow. We're a rugby club that we're about 50 miles south of Manchester in the Cheshire countryside. Our historic fixture list, which we retain a little bit, certainly in the lower teams, we go off to play some old places that I know well, like Widnes, where they don't welcome. Well, they welcome Wilmslow in, but then they like to beat us up a bit because we're posh lads from Cheshire. And actually, when you then get in the bar, we're all equals. And the reality is we're all equals as soon as we step in the pitch. And for that reason, I could never dream of a time when I would spend probably any more than 2 weeks away from in amongst a rugby club. You know, so much as it offered me, so much as it given me. It's probably taught me how to behave at times, because you get into some scrapes and you either learn, humility either finds you or you find it. And knowing how to behave on a rugby field is an art.
Yeah, treading the line sometimes, right?
Treading the line. Yeah.
Okay, let's change tack a little bit now. You mentioned some books earlier on. Could you tell me about Gentlemen and Hooligans?
So I mentioned Sharon's little brother earlier, Edward. Edward I played with. He's 7 years younger than me. Tragically, just before he was 40, he died from motor neurons disease, which is the cruelest of disease. It doesn't rob you of your mental prowess, but it robs you of all your physical attributes. So, and it's a muscle wasting disease. The Doddy Weir and the Rob Burrow fight that's going on now, and prior to that, Juice van der Westhuizen, those high profile people. It's a horrible disease. And we went to his funeral, and it was clearly an outpouring of grief. And I'd played rugby with Edward, so I thought, how can I do him justice? And like all of us who've played rugby, we've all got stories in our heads that one day we probably think we should write them down before senility gets the better of us. And I thought, actually, the only way I can really honor Edward is to write a book about my experience of rugby. So, eponymously, Gentlemen and Hooligans, and take your pick which one we are, or both. And it's 13 chapters, of which probably 7 or 8 of the chapters are stories that happened, told by me. And it's just a celebration of life in rugby. That's all it is. And the proceeds of that, I think Amazon set the fee, so I think it's £2.73, which is around about what a cappuccino used to cost. So if somebody wanted to forego a cappuccino and buy the book, it would A, cure them of insomnia, and B, put £2.73 into the coffers of the MND. So yeah, and it might give them a few laughs, and it might make them think, I've done that. I've done that. How ridiculous. I've done that too.
Amazing. So published author, that's brilliant.
Oh yeah.
Now another interesting thing, and I'd already thought up about how I was going to phrase this question before I spoke to you, Mark, about being on the disciplinary panel and whether it was poacher turned gamekeeper, and now I'm convinced it certainly is.
It absolutely is. Yeah. Yeah. So my old friend who I was having a drink with on Saturday, a chap called Mike Hamley, and Mike is head of European discipline for European rugby. So he's one down from World Rugby. So his busiest weekends are when Europe happens. He's a 71-year-old gnarled ex-rugby player, ex-referee for 30 years, solicitor, which helps, captain of Winslow first team. However, his biggest claim to fame is we were born and bred half a mile from each other in Widnes. So circuitously that we find ourselves both in a posh lads rugby club in Winslow. So having got to know each other probably over the last 20 years, about 5 years ago, he called me up one fateful Wednesday night and said, "What are you doing tomorrow?" "Nothing." "Right, I'll meet you." And we agreed to meet in a pub, neither of whom we go to at this pub at all, ever. Just happened to be halfway between our houses. We met and probably selected because nobody would see us there. And he just said to me, "Right, are you giving up playing now?" "Well, no, but I'll always keep a bag packed, but nobody really calls me anymore. So I'll still play whenever the need comes out." And he said, "Great, right." So, and it was, again, it wasn't a question, it was just a statement and a request. "So what I need you to do is you need to go on this course. So-and-so will look after you. And then you're going to be co-opted on the fast track to being on the East Cheshire Disciplinary Committee." "Why me?" "Well, it takes a thief to catch a thief." So that's me.
Fast tracked as well.
Well, well, probably because I get on very well with Mike, and he's sort of sponsoring me to become, and at the very top level, when somebody does something on a rugby pitch where they either get yellow carded or cited or, God forbid, sent off, there's usually a member of a lawmaker on the committee, and then there's two former players who've played at the very top level. Because of that, it takes a thief to catch a thief. Whereas at the lower level, they just want what they're looking for, and it's dead right. It's absolutely right. Is they want players who know the game inside out, who can recognise somebody who's a wrong-un within 3 seconds, and that's what really I'm there for. And it's and while I would think in my private moments I would know those things, it's quite nice when somebody else has recognised that. So I've sat on these things where things have happened where, you know, and I don't get it. There's a big distinction, isn't there, between rugby and football, and yet, like everyone, I'm a rugby and a football fan, but I'm a different person when I'm supporting football. You know, I support my beloved Liverpool. I'd follow them to the ends of the earth. They're the greatest team that's ever walked the land in my own head. And I'll shout and scream at the referee on the team. At rugby, I would never, ever dare talk to a referee unless I was in a capacity of captain or vice captain or pack leader. Never. Wouldn't even cross my mind. I would never chunter at anyone on a rugby field for fear of being sent off, being booked, being taken aside. And it would just be an embarrassment, I think. And yet I sat on one hearing where a referee he just turned up to referee a game. That's his only crime. And he was assaulted. Oh, and no. That, to me, that rips at the very fabric of the greatest game that God ever granted humankind to play. And we came down on this young fellow. He recognised he'd done wrong, but all three of us on this panel were just incandescent with rage about the fact that somebody had dared take that sacrosanct thing that the referee is the referee. Whether he's doing a good job, a biased job, an incompetent job, he is the referee. And without him, the game would not carry on. and how dare anyone take that into their own hands? So yeah, it really tests your moral fibre. And of course, my mates who know me well go, "You're doing what? Somebody in authority has chosen you to do what?"
Yeah, that must be cause a few laughs when you get together.
Yeah.
Were there any sort of funny stories as well from the disciplinary process, or are they all a bit dark?
It's funny that because I'm sort of training, they're all a bit dark, but and equally they're quite serious. If somebody's being hauled in front of a panel to talk about their misdemeanors on a Saturday, and they're represented, they're there in a shirt and tie, and they've probably got their club chairman with them. The opposition will turn up. Somebody from that league will turn up, and then there's three guys. It's like a courtroom, and we have a note taker as well. So it's all quite official. However, I once sat on a panel, did whatever we did, and I then went to meet some of my mates for a drink, and we were laughing because I was the one, because I'm the office junior really, because I'm training. So we have the hearing, they plead their case, they protest their innocence or whatever, and then we send them downstairs. It's done at our rugby club in Wilmslow, and we deliberate what the decision is, and then I go down and get them. And as I went down one day to get this poor unfortunate young man who was there with his chairman, he was talking to his chairman, and he had his back to me. So as I walked up to him, he said, "I can't believe what they're doing up there. Like, they're all sat there on their bloody high horses." So I had to tap him on his back and say, "Right, we're ready for you now." And, "Oh, right, okay." So we went up, delivered our sentence, and off we went. I went to the pub, and I told my mates about this. They're sat there on his high horse, and what they did, what they then created for me, that one of them got a physical horse, an old horse from one of their kids, like a rocking horse,
Right.
and put it in the committee room, elevated, and said, "Right, that's where you should sit, on your high horse." So when people walk into the room and they say, "Oh, they're all sat there on the high horse," I would literally be sat there on a high horse. Pathetic. Pathetic, isn't it? It goes back to that thing that rugby players are, we're 12-year-olds, really, at heart. That's how we act.
Yeah, and when we get together, it's almost an excuse to go back to that mode, even if you haven't spent the rest of the day like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, Mark. Well, tell me a little bit now about the wonderful charity that you're a co-founder of, LooseHeadz. I'd love to know, like, the origin story, how it all came about, and just some more details about that, please.
So brilliant. Thank you. I'd got to my 50th year, so I was 49. I was playing that game, and I thought to myself, well, I'll have one last hurrah, and then I'll just play when it suits me, usually at home, and I'll usually play when the sun's shining. So, and all the lads that ask me if I'm available, they know I'm not, and they know I'm lying when I say, yeah, of course I am. So this was 4 years ago. So I got myself reasonably fit. It's a very private thing to me. I just wanted to not retire, but have my last game in anger on my terms. And not a lot of people have that privilege. So I did that. And on the last day, I can't remember whether we won or whether we lost. But we played, one man and a dog watching. And I wandered back down to the changing rooms, had a shower for the last time, got dressed for the last time, got my bag, walked into a bar I'd walked in for the last 25 years, dumped it in the big pile of bags that's there on every rugby club Saturday afternoon, went into the bar, got myself a pint of lager. It was a lovely day. It was sort of late April. Walked out to the first team pitch that I used to grace years ago. And instead of thinking, as I should have been thinking, about that try or that almost try or that kick or that line out or that whatever happened, what I started noticing was probably 4 or 5 of the lads at Wilmslow who over the last 25 years had privileged enough that they'd come to me and said something like, I'm not feeling the best. Are you around this week and we can have a coffee? And I did. And I'd like to think I always would. And that made me start thinking about the lads at Staines and Streatham and Croydon and Widnes and my journey, my Burnage days and playing in Manchester. And actually, I'd probably got to 45 blokes mostly before I'd even started thinking about it properly. And I thought, that's not right. And actually, while I'd had the privilege of coaching a team, I would make a dreadful coach. I would only be interested in 6s, 7s, and 8s, and the rest of the team can do whatever they want to do, and it wouldn't be any good. So actually, if there's a legacy to leave, maybe this is it. And so my old mate Dave Nichol, who was playing in that day, I grabbed him at the end of the bar at Wimslow, and I said, "Look, Dave, I've just had a quiet 20 minutes to myself, but isn't there some overt link we can make between rugby union and the mental well-being of the people who make rugby union the thing it is? Male, female, old, young." And he sort of went, "What are you talking about?" So I explained it again, "What are you talking about?" And over the preceding probably 6 weeks, it was 2017, so the Lions tour was just about to start in New Zealand. And I found myself with Dave and with my son, Rob, talking about the same thing. And it had really got into my head that somebody should be doing this, but nobody seemed to be doing it. And it was really focused upon, I've seen lads, and if I'm very honest with myself over the meandering course of life, work goes up and down, relationships go up and down, home life goes ups and downs. And yet rugby has been a constant Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday. And it was that belief, that thing that had looked after me in my ups and downs when there were probably games, if I'm being very honest, where I was just going through the motions. I'd probably been overlooked for a promotion. I was not doing very well at work or whatever it might have been. Yet rugby, I could go along, I could be 12 every Saturday. And it was that, and we kicked it around instead of it, that conversation at the bar fizzling out and just becoming what was it we were talking about? Like, do you want another part of lager? All that. No. We kept going back to it. And Dave's a bit of a wolf in sheep's clothing, which I say that to him a lot, so it'll come as a surprise to him, that he's got incredible talent, but you wouldn't guess it. So when I was talking to him, I knew he was listening, but he was giving any outward physical projection. He just didn't care. And it was my son really who said, "You are a couple of gnarled old players, but the very same thing exists at under 17s, at under 20s, at university, at school. You rack yourself, he outlined that he was playing in a school side that were very successful. And every Saturday, it seemed like selection for the next Saturday started again. And that it would run your week, but it potentially could ruin your week.
Mm.
And blokes are blooming awful at talking, even when we're given the opportunity to talk, like we're given the authority to talk. So that was the germ of the idea that then 4 years later has manifested itself in a few things that frighten the life out of me. One is we're a clothing company, which we didn't start this to be a clothing company. And then secondly, we're a fully blown charity with a duty of care and all these things that, I can't be 12 years old every Saturday. I've got to be normal. And I think what we've managed to do, and the hard work has mostly been down to Rob and Dave, if I'm brutally honest, and they would be magnanimous enough to say, no, it's all three of us. It's not. So Dave is a digital marketeer. So the outward imaging of what we do on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter is mostly Dave. Rob has grown to do that and has become brilliant at it. Rob also works at Bristol Sport. So that's the umbrella organisation covering Bristol Bears rugby, Bristol City football, and Bristol Flyers basketball. So he's seeing firsthand this adulation of the crowd on a Saturday, resulting in Tuesday somebody not being at training in a professional level. And so I don't think it really matters how much money you've got in the bank or at what level you're playing at. Mental illness, the depression, the anxiety, the uncontrollable feeling of of feeling low, none of us invite it, and it's a chemical imbalance on some level, but it's also something that we're not capable of almost managing ourselves unless we're really strong. And at our weakest moment, we're not at our strongest moment. So we need a community around us. And what our stated mission is to put a LooseHead, which is a mental health administrative lead, into every rugby club in the UK. And then our job is to support that LooseHead or collection of LooseHeads with the wherewithal to be able to put mental fitness, take away mental health or ill health. Let's call it mental fitness, because we're not the experts. And, you know, we might understand how rugby clubs work, but we're not the experts in mental health. So we all have a responsibility for our own mental fitness as we do our physical fitness. And very similarly, we know what we do. We should go to the gym 3 times a week, 4 times a week. We should do this. We shouldn't eat those cornflakes at 7 o'clock in the morning or 10 o'clock at night, but we do. So we have a responsibility in a mental fitness setting as well. And I think we've put together a toolkit which allow these LooseHeads in any rugby club, professional or grassroots, mostly grassroots, if I'm honest, that allows anyone who's a member of that club, young, old, male, female, minis and juniors, ladies team, whatever it might be, bar staff, whomever, to be able to put their foot on the ball and think harder about their own responsibility to themselves. And that's it. And it, you know, if we save one person, we've done okay. So
yeah, it sounds amazing, Mark. So explain to me how you've become a clothing company and how that then supports what you're doing.
So we realised that very early on we get rugby clubs, and I get that sense of community and that importance of that community. And if we could only understand some of the nuts and bolts of what mental health is and what mental health isn't, then maybe we can marry them together. We did. We got in touch with a few clinical psychiatrists. I went along to see an organisation called Team Mental Health. Instantly, they said to me, "Whoa, stop talking about mental health. Talk about mental fitness." I went on a mental health first aider course, and I must say I was incredibly. I wasn't. It sounds terribly churlish of me. I wasn't disappointed. But I felt it could go further, and I didn't feel it was like a physical health first aid. You do the course and you think, right, okay, keep someone safe until the ambulance men get there, and then 6 months later you've forgotten everything, and then somebody says, "Oh, can you do it?" And you go, "Oh, I don't know." So it has to be a constant thing. It has to be little and often. As my father would have told me, it's like good gardening and good Bible reading. It has to be little and often. So we realised that some of the things we're going to have to do would cost some cash, and while the NHS is a wonderful thing, it's woefully underfunded in most levels, but it's also woefully underfunded in the mental health services. So if we were going to do something, we'd have to raise some money. So how do we raise some money? Oh, well, let's sell a T-shirt. So we came up with these designs for a T-shirt. We cobbled together a website between Dave and I and Rob. So before we'd even launched the website, somebody had bought a T-shirt. So on a Sunday afternoon, Dave rang me and he said, "Can you check the bank account?" "What bank account?" "The bank account we set up last week." "Is there any money in it?" "Hang on a sec." "Yeah, there's 32 quid in it." "Right, geez, we've sold a T-shirt. We haven't even launched the website yet." So now we're selling a range of T-shirts and hoodies and cycling tops and stuff. All the money we raise, all the profits we make go straight into the foundation, the charity. We've got a variety of people, and I am humbled on a daily basis by the number of followers we have, and then the number of people who say, "I'm going to go out and I'm going to do something, get some sponsorship and raise some money for you to allow you to save another person." And then that's why I say the duty of care weighs quite heavily on our shoulders. And did we ever start it to be where we are? No. Did we ever think we'd be anywhere near where we are? No. How big could it get? We really think this is global. And I say that because a website knows no boundaries, and Instagram knows no boundaries. So we get contacted from people in the States, Of course, Australia and New Zealand, because that's where rugby was invented, so they tell me. And then a stranger place as Singapore. So Rob and I were on a webinar last week with the Singapore Rugby Football Union, talking about the importance of getting this on the agenda. We're all coming out of lockdown. There'll be people coming back to the rugby. You know, we know where we're going with this. We need to be better equipped. And I go back to my voyage through rugby. I know that when I joined the club, as long as I bought my own round and made a tackle and fitted in, then somebody would put their arm around me, we'd have a chat, and there would be a lifetime friendship. And that was somebody that within quite a short space of time, I could go to and say, I'm not feeling the best. My view is, let's make that overt, because I don't know a rugby player or a rugby club member who wouldn't say, absolutely, I'll help. Absolutely, I'll help. So why don't we make that make it eye level rather than hidden?
Yeah, I completely agree, because I concur. It is hidden, or was certainly. It's certainly becoming raised up more and more nowadays. And one of the reasons why I'm doing what I'm doing is to just help raise that a little bit higher as well.
Yeah.
And just going back to the social media thing, I mean, I think you guys have done a wonderful job there, because you've got photos of like the great and good of World Rugby wearing your clothing on the website and the social media, which has got to be great for the profile.
Well, Rob in particular has I can always remember when I went on my rugby union coaching badge. So I'm a level 2 coach, which I never tell anyone in case they ask me to do any coaching. But on the second one, they take you away from the game per se, and they say, right, give us a presentation on a specific part of the game. And so I went along to this course. Happened to be our former first team coach giving the course, so he knows that I was just a cheating 7 with a broken nose. And he said, right, I want you to talk about cheating. Really? So I did anyway. I did that, and I took a few liberties, and I sort of became quite cheeky because I had to. Rob has absolutely staggered me how the amount of people that he's no problem just phoning and saying, hi, we're LooseHeadz, we do this, we do that, we do the other. Would you mind wearing a t-shirt? This is why, because with your help, you can amplify our message. And to a man and to a woman, they say, of course I will, which is a bit of a rugby value. But the ambassadors we have are staggering, all down to Rob. Our patron, so I've given away my age, but I've already said my age. I'm 54. I'm the same school year as Sean Edwards, and he grew up in Wigan, clearly, and I grew up in Widnes, and we played together for Merseyside schools and Lancashire schools, and then his career went one way and mine went another. So when we started this, we knew we needed a big name, so I contacted Sean, told him about it, and the phone just went quiet for 7-8 seconds, which is a long time on the phone call. I had one job, and beautifully he came back and said, yeah, I get it, I'm in, what do you need, and all that. So my contribution is Sean Edwards, but the Brad Shields and the Craig Dawes and the Hugo Moniers and the Amber Reeds of this world that have joined our mission, our merry gang. That's all down to Rob, and the management of that is brilliant. And all they do is they amplify that message. So, you know, even Elton Yantes, I mean, how the heck have we spoken to Elton Yantes, for heaven's sake? He's a World Cup winner and a Lions defeater. Yeah, and that's down to Rob. So, yeah, and I think bringing it very, very back close to home, I didn't want to steal your thunder, but the thing that you're doing is it's truly humbling for us, for an idea that started at the end of a rugby club bar that could have fizzled out and we could have just left it there. but unlike being bad Samaritans, we were good ones, and we didn't cross on the other side of the road, and we kept cajoling it. To feel the support of people like yourself validates the whole thing.
Yeah, amazing. I mean, it's such a, I just think it's such an important subject, topic, activity at the moment in particular. And it just, a lot of things came together, and you know, I see the wonderful work that you're doing, and I just want to do my little bit to help, really. So, you know, I'm delighted to be able to do it. I mean, I may not be saying that 2 or 3 weeks into the run, but we'll soon see.
Well, it's incredible what you're doing. I mean, and the mileage you'll cover. It's that mental fortitude, because our minds will give up way before our bodies ever will, and you kind of get that. I got that in the last 10 years. I've realised I can do more, and I should do more. But you're going to have to test that, because you're running a hell of a long way.
Yeah, 500 miles in 5 weeks. So,
Yeah.
but you know what? I think I think something that will really help me as well is knowing that I'm running from rugby club to rugby club. You know, I've got, you know, I'll be going there to sort of meet somebody that I've already spoken to on email or social media or whatever, go and see their club, how they do things, you know, find out about the little quirks or cultures that they've got within their club, like you spoke so well about with the Staines Club earlier on. And I just think, well, I hope anyway, that will really fill me with energy as well to just push on and carry on, and obviously carry the message of charities such as yourselves.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you. Well, thank you. And you know, we got a lovely message. You know, running a clothing company is nothing that so we've had our ups and downs, and I've got a garage full of mistakes and whatever. And we had a message from a chap in November saying thank you very much for LooseHeadz. I'd given up playing rugby. I was bullied a bit at school. I started playing. I gave up playing rugby because I didn't think I was welcome. I've picked up your social media stuff, and I've gone back to play rugby, and I've found myself again. And to remind me of the good times and the bad times. And then he showed us this part of his wrist by his watch strap. He'd had a LooseHeadz tattoo.
Oh wow!
And we're like, whoa, really? And then about 3 weeks later, his girlfriend got in touch and said these words, which will stick with me for a long time. She said, "Oh, thanks for saving my boyfriend." And it's back and forth on a message. Well, I think he saved himself, but yeah, glad to play the small part. So no, when I say save, you've saved his life.
Wow.
And that's where you think, oh, because the sharp end of the depression, anxiety, getting the better of yourself, not feeling in a great place, escalating. The sharp end is somebody takes their own life, and actually, if we can stop one person, then we've all won a bit.
Yeah, 100%. Completely. Yeah, it's really touching story that, and just corroboration of the great work you're doing. Really.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. So listen, Mark, thank you so much for today. It's been thoroughly enjoyable to talk to you. I've really enjoyed it. If people want to get a hold of you and LooseHeadz, what's the best way for them to do that?
So I never do this. This is Rob's domain, but we are at LooseHeadz with a Z because we think we're cool. On all forms of social media, we're www.looseheadz.co.uk, and I am Mark at looseheadz.co.uk as email. So yeah, pick any one.
Perfect. People listening, I will link all that up in the show notes below, so you don't have to go anywhere else to find it. It'll all be linked there for you. Lastly, have a great day, and it was brilliant to talk to you.
Tim, thank you very much, and good luck on the run.
Thank you.